Hello, my name is Jeff Bowman. I'm the program manager for the Career Exploration Program for the state of Arizona. And I'm here to present a video for folks who are out in the field who are about to administer the ASVAB Career Exploration Program to their students, whether they're school staff, career specialists, faculty members, whatever the case. Chances are, if you're watching this video, it's probably because your schedule did not allow you the chance to be part of one of our regular trainings, which is the preferred way by far, because you can ask questions. It's more of a conversation than it is just a lecture. Or you're part of a very large testing group, and this was just the only way to really collectively get everyone together was through a video. So anyways, this will suffice, and checking the block for validating you to be an administrator for the ASVAB Career Exploration Program. And I just want to go over this in a very structured way. The first thing I want to do is kind of give you an overview of what I want to talk about and how I'm going to talk about it. And then I want to go into some terms, because just like anything else, especially with the government, terms can get a little bit murky. And I want to clear all that up so everyone understands what the terms mean when you hear them. And then I'll get into the actual meat of things. So I'm going to go over this in basically three legs. The first will be sort of how everything happens ahead of time, what needs to happen in order to prepare for this. This process is the most critical part of it is the preparation piece for it, because the day of the test, to be kind of trying to adjust and make up for some shortcomings, it's not going to work because of the fact that we work with an organization above us and we have requirements that we have to fulfill. And if those requirements are not fulfilled ahead of time, then the test isn't going to happen. They're just not going to release it. And if you do test, they may not process it. And we don't want that. We don't want people testing and not have scores. So my biggest concern is to make sure that we avoid all that. And that's the reason why I do these meetings. And I know everyone is busy. But the bottom line is things still have to be done the way they got to be done. And that's what this is. This is that piece that validates you in order to be able to facilitate the ASVAB Career Exploration Program. So anyways, the first part of it is the preparation. I'll talk about the things that matter as far as the paperwork that we need at our end, what you need to be prepared for in advance of the session and how to set it up. And then I'll roll into what to expect on test day, like how the test actually looks in practice when you're actually going through all the little pieces of that. And by the way, I got a little scripted on it's my cheat sheet, so I got to keep looking down. So just in case you're wondering what I'm looking at, there's not a snake on the ground or nothing like that. And then finally, I'll talk about how everything gets wrapped up and how it's handled once the test is finished and each one of the testers are done, and how you'll dismiss them and all that. So that's kind of my agenda. Those are the three, basically a before, during, and after. And then I like to talk about the terms, but just be clear, when we talk about ASVAB CEP, this is kind of my moment to get on, sort of a soapbox for a second and talk about, because a lot of times people hear that, you got students taking the ASVAB, well, that's a military test. Well, yeah, that's a half truth. It's actually this program was designed for students to help with career literacy. That's why we do it. It is a very important piece, and I'm probably a very subjective person to be talking about it, because this is my interest. This is my field. But I think this is a very valuable tool that a lot of students will never get if they don't do it. And what it is, it's just that one little piece that connects everything that they've been learning in school for 12, 13 years and trying to apply it in order to make that transition out. And it's going to be I don't care if they're going to college. That I hear students all the time, I'm going to college, I know what I'm doing. No, you need it more than anyone else. I got students who just really kind of, they goofed off in school and they kind of missed their chance. And no, this will show you, like, it'll take your strengths, it's a scientific approach to amplifying strengths, whatever they are in that student and their interest, to put them on the proper career path so that mitigates wasting resources. That's what this is all about. So this career literacy is a very valuable piece in my mind. That's the biggest reason why we do it. And when you hear people say, why are we doing this military? It's not a military test. The military took it over in '68, but back in the 40s, when it was initially created, it was created for your students, for high school students, to build career literacy. There, that's my little piece right there. So let's talk about some of the terms. ASVAB. I think most people know that ASVAB stands for Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. It's a multi-skills assessment. It's a wonderful assessment that is used It's not just academics. It's got some other things involved as well, electronics information, mechanical comprehension, auto and shop. So it has a more comprehensive approach to careers as opposed to just people going off to college. But it does have the education component as well for higher education driven students too. You'll hear CEP. So CEP is Career Exploration Program. That is the original ASVAB, which was known as the Career Exploration Program back in the 40s when it was first created. So when you hear ASVAB CEP, that's the ASVAB for students. ASVAB Career Exploration Program. And now you're starting to hear this thing called SST. That is the School Staff Administered Test. Back about a year ago, there were some cuts in the federal workforce with a lot of civilians, and we were part of one of those organizations that was affected by it, and we had to come up with a different approach for being able to still give this program to students out in the field, and this is how we do it through the SST approach. And then you also hear ICAT. That is the internet-based computer adaptive testing, which is how ASVAB is delivered. It's basically just a computer adaptive, the computer platform that we give the test through. So anyways, ASVAB, CEP, ICAT, SST, that's basically a student ASVAB test that's being done electronically and given by a school staff member. So that's most of the acronyms that you'll hear. And if something else pops up, I'll cover that when we go through this. But let's talk about the preparation for all this. And I'm going to read this word for word, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you a couple of documents and share my screen to sort of give you a little bit of a visual of what I'm talking about and how all this kind of ties in on test day and why it's relevant. So once your school is scheduled, a lot of this is not going to necessarily be for people in the audience who are just going to be administrators, because even if you're an administrator, you may not have been the person who set this up. So this kind of goes back and forth. There are many different schools doing this many different ways. So, some schools are just doing a single room with 30 students. Some schools are doing, several hundred students in multiple rooms with multiple administrators. So that sort of the logistics of it all is gets a little bit mired, but the bottom line is what I'm talking about still applies to all the schools out there in the field. So you've been scheduled. The person who's setting this up gets a confirmation through a no reply email message that's system generated. They look over that message and make sure everything is correct. And then once they get that, I also get a message, and I send out a training email message with about 3 documents on it. It has 3 documents on it. One of those documents is sort of a slideshow, sort of the big picture of how the program works. Another one of those is the administration manual. The administration manual is by no means a very dense read. It's like 35 pages, and it's got screenshots. So it's something that you should be looking over. It's going to be the thing that really kind of walks you through and helps you understand this process. And then the third and final document is what is known as a voluntary staff agreement, or a school staff test administrator agreement. It's a 2-sided form, and it has to be filled out. And that's going to be one of the 2 most important documents in this process. So keep that one in mind, the voluntary staff agreement. That's number 1. And then the other one that I'll talk about in more detail for the during test is going to be the student test record. Those 2 documents, that is going to be for each person who is administering the test. And by the way, something I probably should have covered over terms is administrator and proctor. And that kind of gets a little bit flaky when it comes to academics. Some people, look at proctors the same things. And administrator and proctor are 2 different things. In the ASVAB world, an administrator is the person who we care about. That's the person who's in charge of the room. That's the person who's going to be signing off on the test record. And that is also the person who signed off on the test administrator agreement, saying that they're going to abide by the rules that we presented to you and maintain security. This is all about test security. All the stuff, everything, this big show with the video and the agreements and it's all revolves around, yes, I'm securing the test. It's all about, it's like any other test. There's no difference when it comes to that. So just kind of keep that in mind when we're looking at all this stuff. We want to make sure people are out there and they understand what they're doing when they actually get that code and they give it to students, and the students go into the test session, who can see this and who can't, and the procedures that follow to make sure the test gets validated at the end. So those are the two big documents. Just kind of keep the agreement and the test record, and those 2 have to match. If Bob Smith is in a room and he has 20 students and they're testing and he signed off an agreement, we got that on file ahead of time. That agreement has to be on file ahead of time. And then he finishes the test and he signs off on the test record and it gets scanned back to our office. Whoever was in that room, Bob Smith, needs to be on both documents. Bob Smith signed off on the agreement, but Fred Jones came in and did the test. They're not going to process the test at DMDC. There's nothing we can do about that. So that's why I'm telling you now, it's really important to keep in mind those two. At the end of the day, that's all that really matters is the paperwork. Security of the test, yes, but if the paperwork isn't right, then it didn't happen right. So keep that in mind. The agreement, whoever signs off on that, and in the training part of it, we sign off. You'll see it, and I'll show you here in a second. There's a place where the staff signs off, and the place where we sign off, and then the test record. And I'll show you where. And it's not a whole lot of stuff you got to fill out. It's just basically fill your name, sign, and the same with the test record. Print your name, sign, and then how many students you had test. All this stuff gets sent back to us, and then we process everything else, and the whole process works like it used to in the past. We pick everything up, and we start printing out all the results. And it's also important to understand that this is all time sensitive. It blows my mind that there are people out there in the field who are in education who don't realize that test sessions are time sensitive. Yes, this is time sensitive. When we get a code and we send it out to you, you can't be using that thing 2 hours later. Will it work? It might, but I'll tell you what, the people who are watching this at DPAC up in Monterey, if they see you logging someone 2 hours later, if you read the instructions on how you're supposed to administer this test, you did something wrong, they're going to shut your test down for that whole school. So please, if you get someone who comes in late, they're done. They've got to hear you read the instructions before they can be logged into the test session. And that the way that's supposed to happen is it's supposed to be a collective group that sits down at a set time. Now, if you've got students who are running late and you know it, I don't know, the bus had a flat tire or something like that, then you need to let us know. And then we can work an alibi from that end. But the bottom line is if you're just going to take it up on your own and log somebody in, giving them the code, an hour and a half after you've started the entire rest of your group, it's going to be noticed, then it's going to get flagged, and it's not going to be a good day. So just keep that in mind. And then when it comes to starting tests, these codes, they will lock out, like if you don't use them soon enough. Now, it's not like 5 minutes. It's not like really quick. You do have, there's some time, there's some understanding at higher headquarters that this doesn't all happen on the turn of a dime. But the bottom line is there is a reasonable amount of time to where these codes are going to, they're going to fade out. They're not going to be valid any longer. So keep that in mind when we go through this whole process. And I'll talk about the codes and everything here in a moment. So I've talked about those documents, the administration manual, the slideshow, and the agreement. That's that first email that goes out. That goes to whoever our point of contact is. They get that. They disseminate it. If we have multiple people in multiple rooms, they get the signatures. That gets collected back up and sent back to us. And then you're good to go for your test session on the day of the test. And then you've seen this video and you understand the procedures in real time as well, or actually in practice is probably a better term I should use, as far as the testing day and how that looks and the preparation up to it. So we get those back. And then once we get all those agreements back, it's really important that we get those back quickly. And the reason why is because that allows us to send you the test material. We can't send test material until we have the agreements. So once the agreements are signed and they're given to us, then the school gets all the test material. And you're going to get the test material in two forms. One of them is an email message, so electronic. There'll be 4 documents. I'll talk about what those 4 documents are. I'm going to show you here in a moment. And then you are also going to send out about 7 to 10 days prior to your test date, a FedEx ground parcel package that will have everything in hard copy. So it'll be redundant. You'll have the test material electronically as well as in hard copy. The idea is if we send it out electronically, you get a little bit sooner look at all the test materials and you kind of look at it and get a more of a comfortable feel of the testing process and what you're going to have on hand and what needs to be handed out, things like that. But you don't have to print it all out either because we send that parcel package out. And that's the idea behind the parcel package, just so you don't have to do all that printing. And here's the documents. That is going to be in an administration briefing. That is the script, for lack of a better term. That is going to be, as an administrator, the person in charge of the test session who is in that room. And we have to have one administrator for each room. Numbers don't matter, like it did with the ASVAB back when the administrators from our office went out, because that had a 40-to-1 ratio. That ratio is gone. School staff administered electronic testing means there's no longer a requirement on numbers. So if it's one administrator in a room of 200, that is that is a valid test. It's not going to be a very fun test because you might want some help, but the bottom line is legally one administrator could give this test. Given as a school staff administered test and it's electronic, those two things. So all the ratios is out. It used to be 40-1. We'd have to have one administrator for every 200 students. So there was a 200 cap, and there used to be one proctor. That's when proctor comes into play for ASVAB, is the helper. So an ASVAB, a proctor is just a helper, and that used to be military recruiters. All that is out. So you can forget proctors. You don't really need them. It's the administrators that matter. And we have to have at least one per room. So if you got 4 rooms, we got to have 4 administrators. We got to have 4 agreements and 4 separate test records. So the documentation follows each individual room. So the way you're going to get them in, you're not logging into anything as an administrator. All you're doing is reading from a script. And the script will have a website. It will walk that student. They'll be sitting down in front of you with their devices, ready to go, fully charged, with scratch paper and something to write with, waiting for you to read the instructions and then give them a code ultimately once you get them into a website. And they're going to go through everything all on their own, on their computer. You have nothing to log into whatsoever. We do that remotely here. So the first thing you'll see in that package, both the email package and the parcel package, is the script or the administration brief. Then there's also the administration instructions, which I like to call the user guide. It's kind of like a play-by-play, like, have them go to this website. This is a screenshot of the page that they're looking at. Go ahead and have them put their name in there. It tells you exactly what's going on every single step of the test session. So you kind of have something. I would have that on hand. That's the administration instructions. I would have that on hand, like maybe on your desk or whatever, but you're really not going to need it. The script, the administration briefing, that's going to have the entire process right there. You'll be able to be able to get them from point A to point B off of that one piece of paper. Technically, it's 2 pieces of paper. It's front and back. And then you're also going to have scratch paper. The scratch paper must be handed out to the students prior to them starting the test. And the cool thing about the scratch paper is it actually has the website address on it printed at the top. So as you hand those out to each student, they're going to be going to that website because it instructs them to do so. And then they're going to get to a certain point to where they put their name in, their date of birth, and ask for a code. They won't be able to get past that code until you read the script, give them the instructions, ask if there are any questions, and then present them the code. And that gets them into the test session. And from that point on, they're actually in it. And we'll talk about what that looks like here in a moment when I get to the day of testing. And then the final document is the student test record. We call that the 601. So that was that document I was talking about. So important. So you're going to get the agreement is going to be signed off ahead of time. And then the day of the test, you're going to have the test record, one for each room. It'll have a place for your name. You're going to sign off on how many students you had test. Will go down in students tested block, and that gets picked up and sent back to us. That's going to be the form that says, yes, you tested those students, this many students, whatever it was, 40 students, and allows us to go into the platform and pull those scores and process those normally. So that was the 4 documents. So it was a script, the user guide, scratch paper, test record. And that's going to be the pieces you will need the day of testing in that room with you, those documents right there. And the scratch paper will be 1 per student. So here's what I want to do now. I want to talk about test day and how everything happens. So on test day, about 30 minutes prior, it's going to be important for the person who is a contact for your school to reach out to us to get the code. And the way it's going to work is we're going to send an email message either the night prior, because all this stuff, is I mentioned, is time sensitive. So we can't just pull the code today and it'll be waiting on you on the 18th of August. It just doesn't work that way. So what happens is we send out an email, very short, concise email. Hey, we're ready to activate your test session. Go ahead and give us a text message at this number. And the reason why we like a text message is because we found out that works best. If you're a person, whether you're the point of contact for your school and an administrator or just an administrator, walking around the laptop just isn't that practical. Having a cell phone in hand and talking with us directly is. Now, I don't expect everyone to be in contact with us, especially if your school has got like 40 different test administrators for one test session. But there should be one person at least in contact. Well, there has to be at least one person in contact with our office. And that email message that gets sent out either the night before or the very early morning. I come into work at 4 a.m., so it might be very early morning. It'll have the information to contact this number and get the code from us and initiate contact 30 minutes prior to your test start time. So whatever that start time was, it was determined by you and Celeste ahead of time. You'll be going off of that. So, you know, your test starts at 8:30, let's say. At 8 o'clock, you're sending a text message to us, and then, you know, send it and forget it, and then get your students seated and get situated, get your room ready. By the time you're ready to go, the message should be there and should have your code along with a quick paragraph of, you know, the process, the procedures for it. It's just basically, here's your code. If you got any problems, let us know. And we are at the other end. Excuse me. We're at the other end in case you have any problems or issues. We don't just leave you hanging. Once you have that code and your students are seated and you've handed out one piece of scratch paper per student, and by the way, that scratch paper does get picked up. It's considered sensitive testing material, so don't just let them take that out the room with them. Once they, and I'll talk about that at the very end of all this, but that is part of the process, is to collect that scratch paper at the end. But once they all have a piece of scratch paper, and they're all seated and their laptops are fired up and you have the code, and it's time, go ahead and start reading from the script. And I'll talk about all those pieces and what it looks like after that. The whole process is self-paced. So how long does it take? It's kind of depends on the student. If they're a quick test taker, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half. I think hour and a half is kind of the norm. Maybe 2 hours. There's 8 different subtests. Technically, there's 9 for the electronic because they break up auto and shop into 2 different tests. But you have a total of 3 hours and 15 minutes for the whole process. So that's what should be allowed. Chances are 99% of your students will be finishing up right around that 2-hour mark. A lot of them are going to be finished up in about an hour and a half, hour and 15 now. And then we'll talk about how you'll close that out as they finish up here in a moment. But let's go ahead and continue on with test day. So let me read from my little script here to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Testers will be seated and only possess the device that they are testing on. One piece of scratch paper. They're allowed to have a pen or a pencil. The administrator should have the test record, the script, the administration instructions, and the access/reset codes. And I was just talking about those. You have the students start their devices, laptop or desktop. Tablets are not allowed. They're going to go to the website. It's really important that they don't Google the website. I get a lot of people when they fire up their computers, the default is Google. Will be, you know, their default browser or Bing or whatever the case might be. And that's fine, but just make sure that you're going up to the address bar at the top of that web page and actually typing it in. And once they do, hold on one second here. I'm going to share my screen with you really quickly. And I'd like to show you what this looks like. So hopefully you're seeing a page that has CEP-ICAT top left-hand corner. After they typed in the web address, and this is on all the documents on the script, the user guide, everything that was sent to you, cep.dpac.mil. And again, if they type this in up here in the address bar, it'll go straight to it. If they type it in Google, it's going to give you all the different commercial sites, and they're going to go to the wrong site. If it's asking for a social security number, you're in the wrong site. So type it up here in the address bar. It'll land right here on the proper page. They're going to click on next, and this will be the page that they're going to go to. It's going to look just like this. It's going to be asking them for their last name, first name, middle initial, date of birth, and the registration code. They'll fill all this out. If they don't have a middle name, then they're not going to have a middle initial. They can leave that blank. This page right here is very important that when they put their name in, that they type it in letter perfect, that there are no spaces. So if they got 2 last names or 3 last names, they should not be using a hyphen. They should not be putting any spaces in there. It should all be butted up next to each other. The platform is going to recognize spaces as special characters. So it's going to cause you problems. If they type their name is, you know, Smith, and then they put a space after that, that's going to be a problem. So keep that in mind. If you got somebody who gets a red error message, that's probably what they did. So just kind of be mindful that I'm showing you hacks right now. So there's about 4 hacks. That's one of them. Another thing, they need to be consistent. For whatever reason, people like to spell their names differently. I'm not really sure why that is, but the bottom line is whatever they put on here, If they have to do recovery failure, they're going to be directed back to this page. If they lose power, if they lose connectivity, whatever, if they want to pick back up on part 7 of the test, then they're going to have to do it the proper way. And the proper way is they're going to have to put their name in and their date of birth and the code in exactly the same way when they do recovery failure as they did initially. So my name is Jeffrey. If I were to put Jeff the first time and Jeffrey the second time, it will never find my test. So just keep that in mind. It's very important that whatever they put in the first time, they put it in exactly the same way for recovery failure if they have to do that. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to have recovery failure, but it might happen. And that's something to keep in mind. So let me go ahead and stop sharing that really quickly. So some food for thought on that one. A couple of documents that I would like to show you really quickly. So I'm going to share a couple of things. They're going to be relative for testing day when it comes to the documentation. So the first one I want to show you is the test record. On the day of testing, this will be the document that will be in the room with you. This is just, don't look at the name of the school, but it'll be for your school. So all the information on here will be relevant for whatever school you are at. And the areas you'll have to fill out are highlighted. We'll have to have your name as the primary test administrator. We don't care about proctors. We just care about administrators. Again, the person who is in charge of the room. And that language, it's not just semantics. It's what's going to validate your test. So if you get proctor and administrator mixed up on day of testing, it might be a big issue. So keep that in mind. We need an administrator name, an administrator signature for every room there are students testing, and the total number of students that you had test. This will be needed for each room there are people testing in. And then the other part of the piece, remember the preparation at the very beginning, is the school voluntary staff agreement form. And there's one for the school on one side, and this is for us to fill out, and this is for the school to fill out. And on the back side, we need one of these for each individual who's going to be serving as a test administrator, saying that they are certified, that I have read everything and I'm aware of my responsibilities, blah, blah, blah. And they'll fill out this right here, and we will fill out the trainer part right down here. And this video is what suffices for actually validating the trainer piece. So if you're watching this video, you will sign this document, get this form back to us through your contact, and we'll sign off on everything, and you'll be good to go. So that's the two records, or that's the two forms that are going to be most important: the voluntary staff agreement and SSTA, school staff test administrator agreement, and the student test record, also known as the 601-4. All right. So I want to go to, actually, let me show you a couple other things. This right here is, I mentioned this earlier. This is called the administration instructions. I call this the user guide. This is that step-by-step, kind of cool to have on hand. It walks you through some troubleshooting areas. It already starts talking about some of the things I talked about before. It also shows you the screenshots of the screens that the students are going to see as they go into the test. So this is a really good one to go through, go over, talks about the release options. I'm going to talk about that really quickly before I move on. So you're testing, keep this in mind. Once they get to this screen right here, they've plugged in that registration code. You've already read the instructions, and they're at that point to where they're going to have to put in their individual student information, the admin part. This is probably going to be the part where you spend most of your time as far as being an administrator. This will be the part you're probably, there's going to be a lot of students who will have no problems with this whatsoever, but there's going to be some, they're going to be putting in an email address for their home address. They're not going to know their phone number. Most adults will be able to work through this in a jiffy, but there's going to be a lot of students who are just going to be really challenged with this. And you as an administrator will have to walk them through this. And I would recommend having each student's information on hand. And if you don't know, if you can't figure, I don't know, or they're homeless or whatever the case might be, then put the school's information in here for a mailing address and phone number if you have to. That's sort of a last resort. But you got to have something in each one of these blocks in order to be able to proceed into the test session. So keep that in mind. Again, this will be probably the part of the test where you're going to spend most of your time as an administrator. You're probably going to spend about 10 to 12 minutes on this right here. And again, it's self-paced. There's going to be probably 90% of your students are going to fill this out and work right past it, but there's going to be about 5 or 6 hands up that you'll be working with. And that's what I'm talking about. Those students are going to be having problems with this. This is going to be the most difficult part of the test for you. It's not going to be ridiculous, but again, you can kind of, if you've done any type of electronic testing before, you'll know what I'm talking about already. And one thing I do want to talk about, this most of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. Something that holds people up is ethnic and racial categories being separated. A lot of people don't understand how the federal government does that. Just know you may have to click down on the drop downs for both of those to find whatever racial and ethnic categories that somebody considers themselves a member of. But this is all voluntary, whatever they want to put in there. But they do have to put something, even if they hit the drop down and hit this. I think the first option is I refuse, I decline to answer or whatever. They still have to answer something. Test option, this has already been predetermined when we've loaded it up at our end at DCAT. They've already got this little test option drop down is already, they don't have to do anything. So the students should not be messing with this. And if they do mess with it, it doesn't matter, because when we reconcile, it's going to revert back to whatever your school already selected. And they're going to hit OK. And they're going to get a little pop-up. Is this information correct? They're going to stop. Yep, that's me. That's my date of birth. I'm good to go. And then this will be inside the test. They'll click next. And then they're going to have a few things. This is all going to be the student. There's going to be a privacy act that they have to agree to, a non-disclosure. They can't talk about specific test questions after the test. They have to agree to. They're going to go through a general instructions page. And this is one thing I do want to talk about, and then we'll move on. There's one of the biggest things that usually happens that kind of holds people up, that I think is a really good hack I already talked about. And that's the spaces after the names when you're typing in the name field. And then the next thing that's kind of a big sort of a showstopper is people having to start the test all over. You're just going to realize they have to put their name in exactly the same way for recovery failure as they do at the very beginning of the test. Now, the third thing is this right here, getting past these red screens. So there's an explicit help. That means somebody actually hit the help button. They don't. If you look, there's a help button over here. Usually they'll do that if they have to use the restroom or if they have a question with the test. They hit the help button. You get past whatever the issue was. They go to the bathroom. They come back. They have a question, whatever, you answer it. And now it's time to get this off their screen. You're going to need a code. The code gets sent with the access code. So there are two different codes. You're going to get an access code / registration code to get you into the test session. And you're going to get a red screen reset code also. It's 24609. Never changes. Standard number. That gets put right here. You'll click next. And then after that, you're going to get this little pop-up. And then you have to click inside that little radio button, that little dot right there. Don't click on the selection. It won't go nowhere. You got to actually click inside that dot to whatever the choice is. And usually it's going to be the first one. The examiners, they're having problems with the test or whatever. Everything else is an exit or a terminate. You don't want that. So just kind of pause, look at the choices, and select the most proper one that you can off that list. And in different parts of the test, you will get a different box that pops up. Again, keep looking for the one that has them go back into the test session or return back to those test instructions. And then this is a different one. Like if they're actually inside the subtest, it'll look like this. And most of these will say either instructions will repeat or testing will continue. Whichever one is appropriate, go ahead and select the appropriate one. And there's the implicit help. This means someone's taking too much time. That's all it is. And it's usually the math parts, 2 and 5. And you'll probably get a few of these. This one you can expect to see. And you go over and you'll see a red screen. And you'll see this. And it'll be like, you're still going to see the same. It'll look like that. You put it into 24609. You'll hit next. But the way to get past it, the selection is going to look like this right here. And you're just going to basically hit continuous subtest. Pretty simple. And that's the way to get past the red screens. And then when they finish the test, you're going to see this, and it's going to tell them to raise their hand and let you know. They're going to raise their hand. You'll come over and see what's going on. You'll see this and tell, oh, you're good to go. You finished the test, and you'll just have them exit out of the test session. And if they actually, it says to use Alt F4, but if you're using Chromebooks, you might notice that Chromebooks don't have function keys. So you're just going to go to the top right-hand part of the page. Just click on the X. Just exit out of that web page. And that'll be good enough to close the page and publish the scores at the server, and they'll be good to go. And then you'll release them as they finish the test session. And this is the actual administration brief. So this right here, this is what you will be reading from verbatim, standing in front of the students when it's time to start the test. And it talks at the very beginning, no headphones, no earbuds, in fact, they should have no other electronic devices. There are no calculators allowed on this test. Again, there are no calculators allowed on this test, so they should have no other electronic devices. They should not be Googling the answers. Everything has got to come from their own head. And this is the actual administration manual that gets sent out. And again, this is what you want to become familiar with. This will give you the best overview of the entire process of testing. So that's how it all looks in practice the day of. You've got your access code, you're reading from the script, they're going through. At the end of it, they close out. And then the test record, that document I showed you, you fill in. I got 20 students, and I signed off, and then it gets sent back to us. Now, in the past, we used to have that parcel package sent back to us through an enclosed self-addressed stamped envelope was inside the package, and all the scratch paper got stuffed in there along with the test records. And then whoever your contact was had to go find a FedEx station or a third-party FedEx vendor. We don't have to do that anymore. Now schools can scan those documents back to us. The scratch paper just has to be destroyed on site. And if you have a problem with that, let us know. We'll send out a package, and you can mail it back to us the old-fashioned way like we used to do with the FedEx envelopes. Let's see, make sure I'm doing all this, covering everything that I need to be covered. So again, I talked about getting the codes the day of. Recruiters are not allowed to see here the access/registration code. It's really important if you have recruiters at your test session, which you don't have to have recruiters for a school staff administered ASVAB, but if you do, and I know some people just kind of have a little bit more of a warm fuzzy to have the recruiters around, somebody who's actually seen the process before, that's fine. They just can't be in the room when you speak the access code, that very first code when you're going to get the students into the test session. They can't hear it, and they can't see it. There's a conflict of interest. And if you understand the role of a recruiter in the military, you'll understand that this is the accessions tool, what we use here at the MEPS to filter in the proper people for the military. And access to this test is very limited. And the recruiters are the ones who are trying to get the people into the military. So that is one of the filters is for aptitude is this test. So that's the reason why they can't have just free reign, hear that code, and I don't know, maybe send it to their buddy who's got some, someone testing trying to get into the military at that time. I'm not saying that happens. I'm just saying that they can't hear that code and they can't see it. So once you get the students into the test session, those recruiters have to be out of the room, out of your sight, out of earshot and eyesight, and then they can come back in after you get them inside the test session. Now the reset code, the 24609, they can have that. That's fine. It's just that initial entry into the test session that they cannot hear or see. If you have any discrepancies throughout your test session, that test record has a place on their remarks block. If Johnny had to go to the dentist and couldn't finish the test, he stopped at part 6, he would write that on there, so we would know what to do at our end, and we would do documentation for that. I just want to make sure I'm covering all the hacks. Like we talked about the name, no spaces after their name, no hyphens, no special characters. Make sure that they are consistent with how they put their name in so they can use recovery failure and not have any problems with that. Red screens, we covered red screen, the 24609, the reset, and then select the proper response after you get that red screen off of there. And then the last thing, stuck pages. So there is a, this is ICAT testing, which is Internet Computer Adaptive Testing. So that's kind of like they answer a question, and when they answer it, it goes to a server, and if they get it right, they get a more difficult question back. If they get it wrong, they get a little bit easier question back. So that whole process, that little, whatever you want to call it, handshake or transfer of information back and forth, can sort of stifle the process or your web page. And the way to refresh it is to refresh it. That's it. If you get that spinning wheel of death, in this case, I think on our site is more like a candy cane that kind of spins and it just sits there and it will never go away. The only way you can do, you got to actually do something about it, and just go up to the top of the web page where the website address is, click it once. It should highlight that web address bar and just hit enter. Or you can just hit refresh. If you have devices that actually have like a button on the keyboard, looks kind of like a circle with an arrow at the end. You can click on that. But anyways, refresh is the way to get past that. It works about 99% of the time. If you can't get past it, then you may have to close everything out and then go back in just like you did at the very beginning. Hopefully it picks up where you left off at. And I think I've covered just about everything. So I wish everybody the best of luck, and I am glad for everyone who is participating in this program. as a program manager, I like to see that we reach as many students as we can, because I think it's a really valuable tool out there in the field. And again, if you got any questions, just go through whoever your contact is, and they can elevate it up to us, and we can get that answered. But other than that, we look forward to getting all these scores back to us so we can process it, and then follow up with the most important part, which is taking these scores and actually doing the post-test interpretation, which is, I call it the career seminar. It's really, it's post-test interpretation is kind of a misnomer. It's more than just an interpretation. We're actually linking them up with all of the platforms that are out there in the field to help individuals with career literacy, understanding their career situation and what careers they might really want to do they may not even thought about before. But anyways, thank you very much, and you all have a good day.